Welcome to today's podcast on healthcare journeys, podcast dedicated to exploring the personal stories behind the headlines in healthcare innovation and patient support. I'm your host Shweta Sapra, and today's episode promises to be deeply moving and insightful. We're joined by Janet Fanaki, whose husband, Adam, bravely battled glioblastoma, as she shares the raw and the heartfelt story of their journey through diagnosis, treatment, and beyond. We also have with us Dr. Alireza Mansouri, a neurosurgeon who will help us unravel the complexities and necessities of clinical trials in the journey towards cure and care. So, without further ado, let's dive right in. Janet and Dr. Alireza, thank you so much for being with us today. So, coming to you, Janet, um, facing a diagnosis like glioblastoma is an incredibly challenging experience. Could you walk us through what your initial reaction was to Adam's diagnosis and how did the harrowing time change your family's view on life?
Well, first of all, Shweta and Alireza, I want to say thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share my story. Yes, you're correct. It is a harrowing experience when you're given a GBM or glioblastoma diagnosis. Leading up to Adam's diagnosis, I only knew very little about GBM, and it was primarily because of the news. There was a celebrity in Canada, the lead singer of the Tragically Hip, who was diagnosed with glioblastoma, Gord Downey. And following his story in the news, it educated me a little bit about what this type of a brain tumor was. And flash forward to September 1st of 2016, Adam was 47 years old at the time. We got the diagnosis that he had GBM. And he was actually alone in a hospital room when he was given that grave diagnosis. And he had called me as I was on my way down to the hospital to bring him an overnight bag in tears. And he said, "Do you want to hear now or do you want me to tell you when you get here?" And I said, "No, tell me now." So I pulled aside and he told me that he had a terminal brain tumor and was given 15 months to live. So anyone who's listening to this who hasn't received that type of news can only hopefully appreciate what was going on in my mind at that time. First of all, for him to be given that news when he was by himself was already very angering. And then when I got down to the hospital, I held him and we had a good cry. And the thoughts that were going through our heads was everything. It was saddening. It was making us mad. But then leading us into like a determination that I don't think either of us had ever faced before in our lives. We both said, okay, look, now that we know what this is, let's just build the best team that we can around us and fight this with whatever we have. And so that's exactly what we did. So it was a roller coaster of an experience. Our children were in grade 9 and in grade 12 at the time. So both very big years for them, one starting high school and the other one ending and starting her university applications. So it just led us into an experience of dealing with a terminal diagnosis, how we were going to handle that, how we were all going to keep our heads above water and help the people around us to understand and to be supportive of us in this new experience that we were going to be embarking on.
That's truly profound, Janet. And talking about the journey after your initiatives that sprung from your experience, you've started the Adam Fanaki Brain Fund and the Resilient People. So we want to know more about the spark that inspired this initiative and that's helping them thrive.
So Resilient People started as an idea while I was spending many, many, many hours waiting in waiting rooms with Adam for our treatments, as well as our just regular appointments with our oncology team at the Odette Cancer Center at Sunnybrook in Toronto. So there was one moment that I was looking around and noticing all the people that were filled in that building. And, thinking to myself, how is it that people get through really tough times? because we were really lucky in the sense that we had a very supportive group around us, both family and friends, as well as our medical team. So, but how is it that not just cancer stories, just any challenge that people face in life, how do they get through it? And then, moreover, how is it that they can even find a way to help others to get through challenges? And I'd known a couple of people who'd gone through these types of stories that I sat down with them and just said, can you tell me a little bit about what you had gone through, why you had chosen this particular purpose? And it might have been writing a book, it might have been starting a fundraising campaign, it might have been becoming a public speaker. Whatever their purpose was, why was it that that was the thing that they chose? And how was it helping them as well as helping others to be resilient? So then I started a blog that was called Resilient People. And then I started a social media page. And from that, many people would write into me telling me their stories. And it was amazing to me how many regular, everyday people were out there who were willing to share their story of resilience. And then it became a podcast. So for me, it became something that was the light in the tunnel. And for anyone who's going through a similar type of an experience, like what I was saying with the GBM diagnosis or any kind of major challenge in life, you're looking for hope, you're looking for inspiration, and you're also looking for people that are relatable, that are telling a story that you can really identify with. So those were all very important pillars in Resilient People. And it was something that really helped me through some very tough times. Now, with the Adam Fanaki Brain Fund, when Adam sadly passed away in February of 2020, he had battled GBM for 3.5 years. He was given a 15-month prognosis, and so he was able to double that, which in our minds was a real win. But when he had passed away, the children and I were thinking about ways that we could help others that were left behind still battling a brain tumor. So in his obituary, we had said that we were starting a fund called the Adam Fanaki Brain Fund that would be helping caregivers and patients. And we were focused more on the soft programs, the things that were like handbooks that were given out to people when they were given the diagnosis of a brain tumor. Virtual support programs that became very, very important during the pandemic. And then it became also a focus for us to help people that were financially challenged. So offering up meal cards, offering up transportation to their appointments, parking that we would absorb for them. So these are all things that we fundraise for. We've been going now since 2020. We've raised over $270,000 and given it to organizations, primarily in Toronto, but that are servicing across the country, like the Brain Tumor Foundation, for example. And it's very gratifying. It's been a really great purpose for us. I like to think that it's helped me and my children to find a positive purpose that has helped us and helped so many other people.
Yeah, and I can't imagine your story is it resonates with a lot of the stories I hear, but also just all of that happening, leading right into the pandemic and the isolation and everything. So it was a great, powerful thing for you to do, to take charge of that and decide to do something proactive. And I applaud you for that.
Thank you.
It's truly inspiring to see how a personal tragedy can lead to such community-wide healing and support. So, in terms of the initiatives, what are your future plans for them?
Well, we're continuing to fundraise and raising awareness for these initiatives that we've been supporting. And as far as Resilient People, I've toyed with the idea of writing a book. Not quite sure which direction I'm going to go in with that, but it's been something that I've been thinking about for a while. So I'm sure at some point I'll put my ideas to screen and see where they go.
It's definitely going to be a bestseller. We're buying it.
I'm buying it. Yeah.
Coming to our next section, clinical trials are like a beacon of hope for many, yet they're often shrouded in complexity. So, Dr. Alireza, why are clinical trials particularly crucial for brain tumor patients?
I'm a strong advocate for clinical trials in general, but given my specialty as a surgical neuro-oncologist, I particularly feel that there's a pressing need for exploring clinical trials because I feel that brain cancer in particular has fallen behind in terms of our understanding of its biology and novel treatments that we can provide, and how much we can extend patient survival compared to, let's say, lung cancer and breast cancer. Just a few years ago, lung cancer used to have a prognosis that was just as bad as brain cancer, but we've come a long way. So, and the standard of care hasn't really changed in nearly 2 decades. We don't have enough therapeutics to move the needle for our patients. There's lots of exciting science coming out of the lab, but I think in order to make sure that we're actually serving our patients, we need to go through robust clinical trials. Now, there's tons of clinicians and scientists out there who've gone through rigorous testing to make sure the idea makes sense biologically. There's lots of processes in place to make sure that a protocol is safe and makes sense for patients. It does not take advantage of their unique situation. It answers a relevant question. So there's a lot of clinical trials out there that are trying to find novel therapies. And given that our standard of care has not been working, given that this disease, especially glioblastoma, is taking patients away from their loved ones at such a critical stage of their life, we need to do better. So I think from a clinician side of things, we need to do better to promote the idea of clinical trials early, because right now we're promoting it more so when our standard of care options have failed, and at that point it might be too late. And I hope that we can spread the message in terms of the safety and some of the concepts that go behind clinical trials to make sure that we build that trust and understanding and widespread awareness of clinical trials among the patient community. On that note, Janet, did you and Adam ever consider participating in clinical trial? Was it ever mentioned to you? And if so, at what point? What obstacles did you face if you did try to consider them?
So we were not given many options for clinical trials. I was trying to remember back. I mean, if you think it's been now 7 years since the beginning of our journey, at that point, we were kind of exploring everything that Adam could possibly take part in. And he was the one who's taking the lead on that for the most part. If we were able to participate in a trial, I can guarantee you that he would have been. But I don't think that there was an opportunity at that time for him. Now, having said that, when I think about what you were just saying about the importance of clinical trials for brain tumor patients, every drug out there, TMZ, for example, that Adam was on for many years, that would have been in a clinical trial at some point. That's now part of the standard of care. So it's so important for patients and caregivers to be participating in these clinical trials.
Yeah, absolutely. Some aspects that have been brought up as potential obstacles in patients considering clinical trials is lack of education. And on the other hand, education knowledge about what clinical trials are all about. And on the other hand, I think we can all agree that there's limited diversity in clinical trials. So for example, in the United States, even though about 20% of the population is Hispanic, the representation of this particular ethnic group in clinical trials is about 8%. So clearly there's something that's happening out there that we're not doing well enough in terms of enrollment into clinical trials in a way that's representative of our general population. So focusing on these themes of limited awareness and education and limited diversity in our clinical trials, how do you think we can do better? How can we improve in these areas?
I would say, one of the things that I keep hearing from caregivers in particular is the importance of peer-to-peer support. And I think that would be an overarching theme for everything involved in brain tumor treatment. So I think that would be something that a group like We Trials would be able to tap into to some degree, connecting caregivers to caregivers, patients to patients, people who have been through the experience of going through a clinical trial, for example, people who are from the same type of cultural background, visible minority, pairing people up together so that they can form their communities and educate each other, perhaps having somebody from We Trials involved in that. I think the peer-to-peer support would be a great start to that.
Definitely. I
Yes.
think the support of peers can actually be a lifeline during tough times. So, Janet, could you tell us a little bit more about how peer-to-peer support has helped you and your family?
Oh boy. Well, peer-to-peer support has really helped me a lot. Finding other people that had gone through a brain tumor, particularly glioblastoma, was integral for me. Being connected to the Brain Tumor Foundation of Canada, they had therapy groups that I was able to take part in person because this was before the pandemic. So that was a great way to meet other caregivers specifically. It just gave us an opportunity after the therapy groups and even, during the week to get together for coffee, to talk outside, and just share our stories and just vent to one another. It taught me the importance of having someone else who's going through specifically this diagnosis. Because it's one thing when you have supportive family and friends, and I would never say that that wasn't helpful to us. But when you have someone in your life who is exactly at the same point as you are in this journey and knows the language that you're speaking about, knows the frustrations that you're talking about, having a peer in this space means everything.
Also, apart from this, like coming to you, Dr. Alireza, from your perspective as a medical practitioner, what do you think are some of the challenges that these peer leaders or like people who've gone through this or the caregivers, they would actually be facing when it comes to like providing this kind of a support?
That's a great question. I personally just like very much exploring how peer support can help others. How can we do better in terms of supporting our patients by taking away the medical jargon? So as a result of that, I've very much enjoyed going into social media groups and chats that try to provide support for other patients. We ask questions. There's medical input from the clinicians, and there's just perspectives from the peers. And one of the challenges I've heard, it's twofold, two challenges. One is burnout. You're very eager to help. You feel a sense of purpose to do that. But then, and on the other hand, there's just unfortunately so many different challenges that go on that are associated with the diagnosis of glioblastoma, whether it's the medical side of things, side effect management, finances, logistics, decision making, all those things. And so that can become a source of burnout. And then on the flip side, I've also heard the feedback that some people experience survivor guilt. So, as Janet mentioned, the average survival is 15 months. If you're doing better than that, it's exciting. Obviously, you feel lucky and you want to use that extra time to provide support for others. But at the same time, sometimes some have endorsed having that survivor guilt. So I think that's very challenging, and it's something that needs to be recognized, supported, and something that someone who's trying to take up this task of being a peer mentor or peer supporter should be aware of that proactively, in my opinion.
Definitely. Janet, from your experience as a caregiver, what challenges did you face? And if you ever felt that there was lack of support or you needed more support, so how did you tackle that?
I would say that we were in a unique position in the sense that, having English as a first language, being both educated, Adam and I spent any minute that we could outside of treatments and any other pressing issues learning about brain tumors and resources that were out there for us. So that we felt we were in a very unique position and a strong position with his diagnosis. But I would say that as a whole, time became an enemy in some ways because there was just never enough of it in the day. When you're a caregiver, you're not just caring for that patient. You're doing all kinds of things in your house. You're having a job, you're going grocery shopping, you're helping your children with homework. You may have an elderly parent that you're still doing things for. It's when you're thrown into a situation where the clock is ticking because someone is dying from a disease, but you still want to help them, but then you're still trying to live your life, it's a mess of a life. It's very difficult. So, you're looking for reprieve and you're looking for breaks any way that you can get them. I was very resourceful in doing that. When it came to family that would offer up support, I would jump on it, even if Adam didn't want it. And there were many times that I would say, to him, listen, I'm not having this person sit with you because, you want it. I need it. So I was very honest and open about what my needs were. And I would say to anybody who's in the same situation, if people are offering support, take it, even if it's just for half an hour. And being honest and open about your story is going to take you very far, because it releases things that are inside of you. And you never know who's going to be able to, be that listening ear or be that supportive person to you down the road.
That's very valuable advice. And for those people who are listening to us, who might want to become advocates themselves, what advice would you give them?
Well, I would say, first of all, be honest and open about what your story is with others. There's no point in hiding or being embarrassed, because this is something that someone else may have been experiencing, or they know someone else who has been living it, and they can connect the two of you together. So that would be really valuable. Looking for support wherever you can get it. Places like the Brain Tumor Foundation of Canada were a great resource for me, especially in the beginning. And there are organizations like this around the world that people can tap into. So those would be two things that I would say would be a good starting point for somebody who is embarking on this journey.
I would. I also have been interested in asking. Sorry. What if you want to go beyond, like someone who may be interested in, just like yourself, establishing a fund or supporting a very major cause like yours? What challenges should they anticipate? What should they look forward to? Those kinds of things.
Well, I guess the challenges come, in the beginning when we had started off the fund, there was a lot of excitement and there was a lot of momentum around it. So, that was amazing because we got a huge surge in money. If you're thinking about extending it past, year 2, year 3, you should anticipate that that's going to dwindle a little bit, and that's okay. You're still going to get those people that'll still support your cause. And the other thing is, to really do your research and to extend yourself to the organizations that you're looking to support. Talk to the people there, find out what their needs are, because it's one thing just to raise money and just kind of dole it out, but it's another thing to do it in a very specific way. And the other thing that I would say too is that on social media, when people do hear about our fund, you do get a lot of people who I have no idea whether or not they are authentic, but they'll reach out in a direct message to say whatever their cause is, my family, we're dealing with this, that, and whatever. We could really use some money. Can you please help us? We get a lot of that as well. So it's, being smart about how you're approaching issuing the funds. We had always connected ourselves to a registered charity. So we knew that the money that we were going to, and we were either dealing with a social worker at a hospital, or we were dealing with, the director at a charitable organization. You just want to make sure that you're approaching in a way that you're doing your due diligence with the funds that you've raised.
Great advice. Thank you.
So now turning to V-Trials, Janet, what V-Trials is trying to do is aiming to create a space where patient stories and science meet. So overall, helping them through their healthcare journey. How do you see this platform filling the gap in the current healthcare system?
So from what I can gather, there isn't an authoritative body right now that's campaigning for the education and growth of clinical trials, specifically in the brain tumor world. Mm-hmm. So oftentimes caregivers to brain tumor patients, as well as patients themselves, say that they want a place to learn more about clinical trials. they would like to know, of all the different avenues that they can explore to help their person who's living with a brain tumor. So I feel that We Trials is in a perfect position right now to be that body that can educate and inform and bring awareness to clinical trials.
That's very kind of you. Put it like very perfectly and very inspiring. Um, Also, imagine a perfect world. So, what would be on your wish list for a platform like We Trials to achieve?
For it to grow, obviously, to offer up a tab on the website on existing trials that people can take part in, or maybe even learning a little bit more about ones that are on the horizon. To have it in a language that's easy to understand. I know Alireza just mentioned that earlier in our conversation. I feel that that's a very important part to the bit on clinical trials. Because oftentimes we're downloading things off the internet and reading them, and you're not really sure if you're even qualified to be learning about it or understanding it. And then present ways that patients and caregivers can approach their healthcare team, giving them the language on what it is that they should be asking for, having that dialogue with them on clinical trials.
These are great recommendations. Anything, Dr. Alireza, you'd like to add?
No, I think it's very validating to hear that, because it's been part of our hypotheses that simplification of clinical trial language, peer support, tailored educational material are all helpful, and this will be the foundation of what we're starting with, and hopefully we can keep building on it with ongoing peer feedback from individuals such as yourself who've been through this. So that's awesome. Thank you.
Welcome.
This brings us to the closing of our today's episode. And as we close today's episode, I want to thank you again, Janet and Dr. Alireza, for your valuable insights and for sharing your stories. To our listeners, thank you for joining us on Healthcare Journeys. Remember, every story shared is a step towards change. Until next time, this is Shweta encouraging you to share your stories and support those around you. Thank you.